I was the invisible daughter, the one who watched from the sidelines while my parents worshipped my brother's every achievement. For years, I tried to earn their love, but no matter how high I climbed, they never looked my way. Until the day I stopped chasing them and built a life that forced them to see me. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about finding your worth when the people who should have loved you the most forgot you first. They say every family has its favorite child. I just didn't know mine would be so obvious. Growing up in our little two-story house outside Chicago, I used to think love was fair. Mom would kiss me on the forehead before school, Dad would check my homework, and my brother Ryan and I would argue over the TV remote. But slowly, the air in our home changed. The way Mom's eyes followed Ryan across the living room, glowing with pride when he scored another touchdown, or the way Dad clapped his back after every A grade like it was a world record. I was the quiet one, the girl who read too much and spoke too little. They called me steady, sensible, the responsible one. At first, I thought those were compliments, but now when I look back, I realize they were just words people use when they've stopped seeing you. When you're the one who keeps the house calm while everyone else shines. I wasn't the child they adored. I was the one who filled the silence. By the time I turned 15, the pattern was impossible to miss. My birthdays were small dinners, maybe a store-bought cake if Mom remembered. Ryan's birthdays? Full-blown backyard parties with banners, music, and neighbors who came to cheer the golden boy. When I got straight A's, Dad said, "That's what we expect from you, sweetheart." But when Ryan passed an exam he barely studied for, Dad said, "That's my boy." The imbalance didn't make me angry at first. It made me invisible. I started staying longer at the library, volunteering at school events, just so I could avoid the constant reminders that I was background noise in my own family. I remember one Christmas vividly. I saved up money from babysitting to buy Dad a leather wallet. He smiled politely, said thanks, and then turned to Ryan's gift, a signed football jersey, and his eyes lit up like a child. That night, I cried in my room quietly, trying to remind myself that I wasn't jealous, just forgotten. But deep inside, a small voice whispered, "Maybe you are jealous. Maybe you just want to be loved too." High school came and went like a blur. I kept my grades perfect, joined a debate club, even won a state-level science fair. But every success felt muted at home. Mom would mention Ryan's football stats to guess, his college applications, his bright future. When she introduced me, she'd say, "And this is Claire. She's good in school." That's all. Good in school. I used to rehearse achievements in my head, hoping one day she'd beam with pride the way she did for him. But that day never came. During senior year, I applied to Stanford secretly. I didn't even tell my parents until I got the acceptance letter, a crisp white envelope that felt like proof that I mattered. I still remember how I ran to the kitchen, letter in hand, my heart racing. "Mom, Dad, I got into Stanford," I said, my voice trembling with excitement. There was a pause. Mom smiled faintly. "That's great, honey," she said, not looking up from her grocery list. "But we can't afford Stanford. Maybe you can apply to a local college instead. Ryan will need tuition for law school soon." Her tone was calm, matter-of-fact, as if she hadn't just crushed the biggest dream of my life. I stood there, stunned, the letter shaking in my hands. Dad added, without looking at me, "Your brother's future depends on timing, Claire. You'll understand one day." I didn't cry then. I just folded the letter, walked to my room, and told myself I'd find a way, alone. That summer, I worked double shifts at a diner.
I served coffee, cleaned tables, and saved every dollar. When my friends went on trips, I stayed behind. I got a partial scholarship and took out student loans for the rest. The night before I left for California, I packed my bags quietly, not wanting to make it a big deal. Mom didn't help. Dad didn't come to the airport. Only Ryan showed up, half asleep, holding his car keys like he couldn't wait to leave. "Don't get all dramatic. It's not like you're never coming back," he said. I smiled, but my chest felt heavy. As the plane took off, I looked out the window and realized I was free, but not loved. Stanford was beautiful, bright, full of people who didn't know who I was, and for the first time, that felt like a blessing. I studied architecture because I loved the idea of building things that lasted, even when people didn't. My professors noticed me. My classmates respected me. But every time I checked my phone, there were no missed calls from home. Not even on birthdays. Not even on holidays. I told myself I didn't care. But late at night, I'd scroll through Ryan's Facebook post. Family dinners, vacations, captions like, "Nothing like time with the folks." And each photo felt like a reminder that I'd been erased from my own family portrait. Years went by, and I graduated with honors. No one came to the ceremony. My best friend's parents brought flowers for her. I clapped for myself. I moved to Chicago afterward, took an internship at a small architectural firm, and worked harder than anyone there. Every design I made, every model I built, felt like a piece of me trying to prove something. Not to the world, but to the people who never saw me. When I got promoted, I bought my own apartment. Small, clean, quiet, mine. And yet, when I called home that night to share the news, Mom's voice was distant. "That's nice, dear. Did you know Ryan just got engaged? The girl's family is wealthy. We're so happy for him." I smiled into the phone, pretending it didn't sting. "That's great, Mom," I said softly. "Give him my best." After that call, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the window, and whispered aloud, "I'm proud of you, Claire." Because if no one else would say it, I had to say it myself.
When you grow up being overlooked, you learn how to survive in silence. That became my superpower. I didn't need applause anymore. I built my own kind of peace. My small apartment in downtown Chicago became my sanctuary. Every morning, I brewed my own coffee, opened the blinds, and reminded myself that I was doing something my family never believed I could, living on my own terms. Work was my everything. I stayed late, volunteered for projects no one wanted, and started getting noticed by senior architects. My boss, Mr. Halden, once said, "Claire, you've got the kind of discipline people can't teach. You build like you've got something to prove." I smiled, because he was right. I did. My blueprints were more than drawings. They were silent letters to my parents, filled with the message I could never say out loud. Look at me now. But even with success surrounding me, the loneliness was unbearable sometimes. I'd come home to an empty apartment after 12-hour days, heat up frozen pasta, and scroll through family photos of people who'd stopped remembering I existed. Mom and Dad at Ryan's wedding, Ryan's wife's baby shower, holidays with matching sweaters. I was nowhere, not even a name in a caption. Time blurred into years. By 27, I had climbed from intern to senior architect. I had a small team, a company car, and my own office with glass walls overlooking the Chicago skyline. That view felt like a personal victory. I had earned every inch of it without shortcuts, without family connections, without help. One winter evening, after landing a major client, my coworkers threw a small celebration at a rooftop bar. Between laughter and champagne, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something in me hesitated.
When I answered, a woman's voice said softly, "Claire, it's Mom." My heart froze. For a moment, I thought it was a prank. I hadn't heard that voice in nearly 3 years. "Mom?" I whispered. "Why are you calling me?" There was a pause, then the sound of her sigh. "Sweetheart, I saw an article online. They said your firm won the downtown project. I just wanted to say, congratulations." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for a second, my chest ached. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, her pride, her warmth, but now, hearing it after years of silence, it felt empty, like a stranger's apology. Still, I couldn't hang up. Old wounds have a way of begging for closure. "Thank you," I said quietly. "How's everyone?" She hesitated, then said, "Ryan's been having a hard time. His business, well, things haven't gone the way he hoped. They might lose their house." And there it was, the real reason. Not pride, not love, need. My stomach turned cold. I almost laughed at the irony. They had erased me from their lives, and now they were calling for help. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said flatly, "but I'm not sure what I can do." Mom's tone softened, pleading. "Claire, you've done so well for yourself. You've always been so capable. Maybe you could lend him something, just to help him get back on his feet." I looked out at the glittering city below, the skyline that I had built piece by piece through sleepless nights, and I realized my mother still didn't see me. Not as a daughter, not as a person, just as a solution. "I can't," I said. "I'm busy, Mom. I have a life now." Silence followed. Then she said quietly, "You've changed." I swallowed hard. "No, Mom. I just stopped trying to be someone you could love." I hung up before she could respond. That night, I cried. Not out of sadness, but release. The kind that comes when you finally stopped waiting for someone to see you. After that call, something inside me shifted. I stopped working for validation. I started designing for myself, for joy, for meaning. My ideas became bolder, more personal. I proposed community spaces instead of corporate towers. I wanted to build places for people who needed to be seen. Single mothers, struggling artists, the overlooked. My boss noticed the change. He said, "Your designs have soul now. You're not just drawing buildings. You're telling stories." Maybe he was right, because for the first time, my work wasn't about revenge. It was about healing. A year later, my firm offered me partnership. Me, the quiet girl who once couldn't afford a flight to college, now a partner in one of Chicago's top firms. When the local news ran a story about it, I didn't tell anyone. But somehow, Mom found out again. This time, she didn't call. Ryan did. His voice was tense, polite. "Hey, sis, long time, huh?" I almost laughed. 3 years, to be exact. He chuckled awkwardly. "Yeah, so listen, Mom and Dad told me about your promotion. That's amazing, Claire, really." His tone shifted, hesitant. "Actually, I wanted to ask, could you maybe help me get a job at your firm? I'm thinking about starting over." My chest tightened. He wasn't calling for connection, just opportunity. "Ryan," I said quietly, "you don't need my help. You've always had theirs." There was a long silence before he said, "You really haven't forgiven us, have you?" I closed my eyes, tears burning. You can't forgive people who never said sorry. Then I hung up. Months passed and I threw myself deeper into work. The downtown project became my obsession, a glass and steel masterpiece that would transform the Chicago skyline. Every blueprint felt like a reflection of my own resilience. One late night, while reviewing designs, my assistant knocked on the door. "Claire, there's a reporter here asking for you." I frowned. It was nearly 10 p.m. "Send them in," I said. A young woman stepped in with the camera crew. "Ms. Reynolds, we're doing a feature on women shaping modern architecture. We'd love to highlight your story, your journey from a small-town girl to one of Chicago's top architects." For a second, I was speechless. No one had ever asked about my story before. She smiled and added, "Your work has inspired so many women to chase their dreams." As the cameras rolled, I spoke about my journey, the long nights, the self-doubt, the loneliness. But I didn't mention my family. I couldn't. Some stories aren't meant to be shared. They're meant to be survived. When the interview aired 2 weeks later, my inbox flooded with messages, strangers thanking me for inspiring them. But among them, one message stood out. "We saw your interview. We're proud of you. Love, Mom and Dad." I stared at those words for a long time, unsure whether to cry or laugh. For the first time in my life, their pride felt too late to matter. But fate wasn't done with me yet. A month later, I received an invitation to an award ceremony, the Chicago Excellence in Design Gala. My project had been nominated for Architectural Innovation of the Year. It was a black tie event at the Drake Hotel, the kind my parents would have loved. As I stood on the stage that night, lights shining, applause echoing, I felt something shift deep inside me. The emptiness that had lived in me for years started to fade because I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built something far greater, myself. But destiny has a cruel sense of timing. As I walked off the stage, bouquet in hand, I saw them. Mom, Dad, Ryan, standing near the exit, awkwardly clapping. My breath caught in my throat. They looked older, smaller, and for the first time, they looked at me not as background, not as invisible, but as someone they no longer recognized, someone they couldn't control. I froze for a second, heart racing, torn between anger and compassion. Then Mom whispered something I could read from her lips even from across the room. "We're sorry." And that's when I realized the story wasn't over. The girl they forgot had finally become someone they couldn't ignore.
For a long moment, I couldn't move. The crowd around me buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, but all I could hear was the pounding in my chest. My parents stood near the exit, faces older, more fragile than I remembered. Dad's once proud shoulders were slumped, and Mom's smile trembled like she didn't know whether to stay or run. Ryan was there too, looking uncomfortable in his suit, hands shoved into his pockets like a boy caught doing something wrong. For years, I had imagined what I'd say if I ever saw them again. Sharp words, tears, anger. But now that they were right there, I felt nothing. Just a hollow ache, the kind that comes after too much waiting. I took a slow breath and walked toward them, heels clicking against the marble floor. Mom's eyes filled with tears the moment I reached her. "Claire," she whispered, her voice breaking, "we've missed you so much." I almost laughed. "Missed me?" I said softly. "You forgot I existed." Her face crumbled, and she reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold it either. "We were wrong," she said, "about so many things." Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. "We're proud of you, kiddo," he said, the same tone he used when congratulating Ryan for winning a game years ago. "You've done well, really well." The words should have meant something, but they didn't. They sounded rehearsed, hollow, too late. We sat at a small table in the corner while the music played softly around us. Mom kept talking, filling the silence with guilt. "We watched your interview," she said. "It was beautiful, Claire.
You've become such an amazing woman. I looked down at my glass, tracing my finger along the rim. You didn't seem to think I was amazing when I left for college. She flinched. We didn't know how to handle it. You were so independent, and Ryan needed us more. I looked up at her, meeting her eyes. No, Mom, he didn't need you more. You just chose him more. She started crying quietly. For a brief second, I felt sorry for her. Dad leaned forward, his voice low. We made mistakes, big ones. We thought we were doing what was best for the family. I shook my head slowly. No, you did what was easiest for you. Loving Ryan was easy. He was loud, charming, everything you wanted. Loving me required effort. Ryan finally spoke up then, his voice small. Claire, they're trying. Don't be so hard on them. I turned to him, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. You don't get to say that, Ryan. You had everything. Their time, their money, their love. You didn't even notice when they stopped saying my name. He looked down, ashamed. The silence between us stretched, heavy and raw. After the gala, they asked if we could have dinner the next evening. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe part of me still needed closure, or maybe I just wanted to see if they could change. The next night, I met them at a small family restaurant near the river. When I walked in, Mom stood up quickly and hugged me tight. I froze for a moment before slowly patting her back. We ordered, made small talk, weather, work, meaningless chatter. But beneath it, a storm brewed. Finally, Dad sighed and said, Claire, we know it'll take time, but we want to be a family again. I looked at them, the same people who once told me they couldn't afford to send me to college, yet paid for Ryan's second car. A family? I repeated. Do you even know what that word means? Mom's lip quivered. It means forgiveness. I set down my fork. No, Mom. Forgiveness means someone admits what they did, not hides behind excuses. Dad rubbed his temples awkwardly. We're sorry, Claire. What more do you want? I looked him dead in the eye. I want the truth. I want you to admit that you loved him more, that you made me feel like I didn't matter. The table went silent. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Mom whispered, We were scared. You were always so strong, Claire. You never needed us. My voice broke as I said, Every strong kid starts that way, pretending not to need love because they already know they won't get it. That night, I didn't go home right away. I walked along the river, the city lights reflecting on the water like scattered memories. Their words echoed in my head. You never needed us. How easy it must have been to believe that. To love the loud one, the one who demanded attention, instead of the quiet girl who waited for it silently. I sat on a bench until the wind turned cold, thinking about everything I had built, the life, the success, the stability. And I realized that all of it, every achievement, had been shaped by their neglect. It had fueled me, defined me, but also wounded me in ways I was still discovering. My success was a monument to my pain. And yet part of me still longed for one thing I could never build, a home that loved me back. When I finally got home that night, I sat at my drafting table and stared at an unfinished design, a project proposal for a new community art school. I had been hesitant about it for weeks, unsure if it was worth pursuing, but suddenly it felt right. A place for kids like me, quiet, overlooked, forgotten, to be seen. I stayed up till dawn finishing the design, tears blurring my vision. It wasn't just a building anymore. It was my story in glass and steel, a space where no one would ever feel invisible again. A few weeks later, my proposal was approved. The city loved it. A community art school built in the heart of Chicago, designed to nurture hidden talent. It became my passion project, the one that mattered most. Reporters started calling it the Soul Project, and it drew national attention. My firm decided to name it the Reynolds Center for Creative Youth. I didn't argue. For once, my name being associated with something good felt healing. On opening day, as I stood on the stage cutting the ribbon, I saw a crowd of young faces, bright, eager, full of hope. And behind them, in the distance, my parents stood quietly. Mom was crying. Dad looked proud. But this time, their presence didn't shake me. It didn't make me smaller. Because I finally understood I had outgrown the version of myself who needed their love to feel complete. I smiled at the crowd and said, "This center is for every kid who was told they weren't enough, because they were." The applause that followed was the kind of sound I had chased my whole life. Only now, it didn't feel like validation. It felt like peace.
It's been a year since the opening of the Reynolds Center, and sometimes I still walk through its halls late at night when the world feels too quiet. The walls are lined with student art, wild bursts of color and emotion that remind me of how I used to feel before I learned to hide everything behind control and success. I watched the janitor sweeping near the entrance, and I realized I've built the very thing I needed as a child, a place where expression was celebrated, not compared. The laughter echoing from the studio rooms is the kind that fills spaces no silence can swallow. Every time I see one of the students win an award or simply smile with pride, I feel something settle inside me. Maybe this is what healing looks like. Not forgetting, not forgiving right away, but building something beautiful out of the wreckage. Sometimes after events, I'll find an envelope waiting on my office desk. My mom's handwriting, shaky and familiar. She sends old photos, family recipes, clippings of articles about me she's cut from newspapers. She never asks for anything. She just writes, "We're proud of you." I don't reply, not yet, but I don't throw them away either. I keep them in a drawer, not out of sentimentality, but because they remind me that people can change, even if it's slow and clumsy. A few weeks ago, I got a call from my brother, Ryan. His voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Mom's not doing great," he said. "It's her heart. Dad's been lost." There was hesitation in his tone, the kind that carries years of things left unsaid. "She wants to see you." For a long moment, I didn't answer. My instinct was to say no, to protect the peace I had finally built. But something in his voice, small and almost childlike, made me pause. "I'll come by," I said finally. The next morning, I drove to their house, the one I'd once left behind without looking back. The porch looked smaller, the paint faded. Inside, Mom was lying on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale but her eyes soft when she saw me. "Claire," she whispered, her hand trembling as she reached for mine. This time, I didn't hesitate. I sat beside her and took her hand gently. "You came," she said, her voice barely audible. "Of course," I replied. For the first time, there was no anger in my chest, no walls, just quiet acceptance. Dad sat across the room, his eyes glossy. He said, "You've done so much good. We should have seen it sooner." I looked at him, at the man who'd once told me to stop being so sensitive. There was something fragile about him now, something human. "You see it now," I said softly. "That's enough." That night, after dinner, Ryan and I sat outside on the porch steps, the same place where we'd once fought over who'd get the bigger slice of pie. The air smelled like rain. For the first time in decades, we talked, really talked. He told me about his struggles, about how the pressure to be perfect had eaten away at him after our parents started expecting him to carry the family's image. They built me up so high I couldn't breathe, and when I fell, they tried to hide it. I looked at him, seeing not the golden boy who got everything, but a man carrying his own cracks. "We were both just trying to survive them," I said quietly. He nodded, eyes glistening. "I should have stood up for you," he whispered. "I was a coward." I smiled faintly.
Maybe, but we were kids, Ryan. We didn't know better. For a while, we sat there in silence, listening to the soft hum of crickets and the distant sound of the train passing through town. "You've changed," he said finally. I exhaled slowly. I had to. No one was coming to save me. He nodded, and for the first time in our lives, I think he understood what that meant. Mom passed away 3 months later. It was peaceful, in her sleep, surrounded by family. The day of her funeral, I stood at the edge of the cemetery, the autumn leaves swirling around my feet. The pastor's voice blurred into the background as I watched Dad clutch a folded handkerchief, shoulders shaking. When it was my turn to speak, I walked up slowly, my heart steady. "My mother was complicated," I began, my voice clear. "She loved in ways that sometimes hurt, but she taught me something. Even love that fails us shapes us. It teaches us to love better." I looked at Ryan, who was standing beside Dad, and added softly, "She tried in the end, and that matters." My words weren't about absolution. They were about truth. After the service, as people hugged and cried, I walked to my car alone. But this time, the loneliness didn't sting. It just felt honest. When Dad came over, his hand shaking as he placed it on my shoulder, he whispered, "You've become the best of us, Claire." And for once, I didn't deflect it or doubt it. I just nodded. Because maybe in some way, I had. Months passed. The Reynolds Center thrived. The students grew, the art blossomed, and every time I stood in that building, I felt like I was standing inside my own redemption. Ryan came to visit sometimes, bringing his kids, showing them the art rooms. Dad wrote letters every so often, simple ones, filled with quiet apologies and small updates about life. I never expected reconciliation to look like perfection. It didn't need to. Healing wasn't about erasing what happened. It was about learning to live without letting it define me. One evening, after a long board meeting, I stayed late at the center, watching the sunset spill through the glass windows. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who sat in her childhood bedroom, wondering why her parents didn't see her. I imagined sitting beside her now, holding her hand and whispering, "They didn't see you then, but one day the world will." And in that moment, I realized I wasn't chasing their love anymore. I was living my own version of it. When I built, piece by piece, and every student I helped, every life I touched. Now when I drive past the old family home, I don't feel bitterness, just a strange kind of gratitude. That pain carved me into someone strong enough to create beauty out of it. I still get those envelopes from Dad sometimes. Photos of his garden, postcards from small trips, short notes that say, "Thinking of you." I don't always reply, but I keep them. Because sometimes the smallest effort means the biggest change. On the first anniversary of Mom's passing, Ryan organized a family dinner. Just me, him, his wife, their kids, and Dad. It wasn't perfect. The conversation stumbled, the air felt awkward, but there was laughter too. Real, unexpected laughter. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like an outsider in my own family. On my way home that night, I looked at the lights of the city and smiled. My mother's absence, my father's regrets, my brother's guilt, they were all parts of a story that could have broken me, but instead, they became the story that made me whole. And maybe that's what forgiveness really is. Not letting them back in to hurt you again, but finally setting down the weight of what they did. I'll always be the daughter they forgot. Yes. But I'm also the woman they'll never overlook again.